We're talking with Tim Barton. He's got a new book out with his father, David Barton, The American Story, Building the Republic. And it tells the first 7 presidents, and these are real men. But what can we learn from those founding presidents?
Well, one of the things that we point out, George Washington is known as the father of America, also known as the indispensable man, and quite arguably so. Had it not been for George Washington, questionable if we win the American Revolution. Had it not been for George Washington, the Constitutional Convention probably would have fallen apart because he was a president. Had it not been for George Washington, which also you can back up, even at the end of the Revolution, he helps win the Revolution, and then his generals want him to become the king of America, right? He turns that down. More than one occasion, people wanted him just to take over because they thought Congress was inept and we don't trust all these other people. We know and love you, George Washington.
Right.
So he helps get through the Constitutional Convention when it's fallen apart. So without him, there's no Constitution. And then he becomes president, and he set the example for what a president should be. There were no term limits. And he set the example. He said, really, nobody should serve more than 2 terms because then it would be like they were being a king. And no other president did except for FDR. And he was and arguably in some ways trying to become a king of America back in the World War II era. But George Washington showed what a peaceful transfer of power looked like when nobody really in the world had seen that at that time. So George Washington is incredible, but in George Washington's cabinet, he has all these other founding fathers that are there, and there are some major problems happening during George Washington's administration. Part of it, England and France are in the midst of some of their many, many wars, right? France is going through their revolution, and Washington's cabinet is really split over, are we team England or are we team France?
Yeah.
And even this is where John Adams and Thomas Jefferson have their falling out, because up to this point, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, they were in the committee together drafting the Declaration. They are friends. They're allies in this. And then under Washington's administration, they have a major split falling out over some of these issues. And
Jefferson, France, Adams, England?
Correct. And Washington, as he's seeing all of this unfold, it's interesting, when you look at his farewell address, he wasn't writing his farewell address as some theoretical advice to the nation. Everything in his farewell address is what he was seeing the members of his own cabinet having these issues. So when he says, don't be distracted by foreign entanglements, let's focus on our nation right now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all these, they're so practical. And the reason I even bring this up is his farewell address, the most significant political address ever given, has the most practical advice for us today as a nation, because we can look at what we're doing. We've sent more than $200 billion to Ukraine with no accountability. Like, what are we doing? We're not protecting our southern border, but we're sending money to all these other nations around the world. We're sending money to fund the UN that hates us, that doesn't support us, that is anti-American values. George Washington, literally his advice was, yeah, let's not spend as much time with things out there. Let's focus on America. Well, he starts going through in his farewell address, and he probably gives maybe 12 different pieces of advice, approximately.
Yeah.
But he talks about avoid party over principle. Don't support a political movement more than the principle of the nation. Well, we live in an era today where it is exactly about my party winning more than the principle. And we actually talked even before the show where we've seen politically that it used to be a time where you might have somebody in a political party say, well, I don't support this position. But then when it came down to it, they voted to support their party, even though they knew it was wrong in that issue. We have come to the place where in our modern culture, it's become more important that somebody's side wins than what the principle actually is. The principle of life, or the value of life, that marriage and gender or
property, or any of a number of other things.
Which we can go even further, because George Washington talked about that we should avoid debt under all circumstances. Don't allow the nation to go into debt. And here we are, trillions upon trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. And as he goes through, which, yeah, you've got so many good pieces of collection regarding that.
Yeah, no, this is a Continental note, and he said that a wagon full of Continentals would not buy a wagon load of supplies because it was supposed to be backed up by 4 Spanish milled dollars or the value thereof in gold and silver. This is printed in Philadelphia. Reason Washington's troops didn't have shoes at Valley Forge is because there was no money behind the money.
Right.
And they hated paper money.
And going back to the adage, it wasn't worth a Continental.
Yes.
That's a Continental, and it was worth nothing.
Which is why I own it from eBay. I can buy it. You can buy them now, like buying Confederate money or picking up Zimbabwe notes, $100 trillion Zimbabwe notes.